Never bet against America.
What's up, Opportunity Cost investors? Mohnish Pabrai is an up-and-coming legendary value investor known for his book, The Dhandho Investor. On top of that, he's also known for his technique that he calls shameless cloning, his Pabrai investment funds, and his sick mustache. So if I had to guess right now, I'd say that most people watching this video have already read The Dhandho Investor. And if you haven't, I left a link in the description below if you want to read it, which I highly recommend you do because it's well worth the read. But I'm also guessing that for the most of us who have read The Dhandho Investor, we've probably missed over the fact that there's a math error in this book. And not to spoil too much of what's to come in this video, but the math error itself isn't actually the fascinating part. The fascinating part actually comes from the reason or reasons why we might have missed this math error. And by understanding these concepts, it can actually help us become better investors. So I hope that was a big teaser of what's to come, and I hope you're excited. But without any further ado, let's get in this video. One of the components of the Dhandho Investor was this concept of the Kelly Criterion, which Pabrai mentioned was actually a mistake to include in the book since its publishing.
I'm glad you brought up the Kelly formula. The Kelly formula was a mistake on my part. I should have never put it into my book.
Perhaps because he saw this video coming. Regardless, to help Pabrai explain the concept of the Kelly Criterion, he talked about the business venture of Patel. Using the discounted cash flow formula, he showed the different values of the business venture under certain circumstances. It wasn't actually the Kelly Criterion where Pabrai had this math error, it was actually the application of the discounted cash flow formula.
This is table 1.1 in the Dhandho Investor. In this table, Pabrai is giving us a business scenario where Patel has the opportunity to purchase a business that'll give him $15,000 every single year for 10 years in free cash flow, where then he sells the business on the 10th year for $50,000. On the right hand side, we have the present value of future cash flows discounted at a 10% discount rate. Now I know that sounds like foreignese to most people, but I'll explain it like this. What Pabrai is really saying here is Patel has two opportunities. He can either purchase this business or he can take that money and invest it in something that's going to give him 10% guaranteed every single year. How do you know which opportunity to choose from? It depends on the cost of the business. Because if you think about it, if you had to pay $15 billion for this business, it's not going to be worth your time and your money because you're only receiving $15,000 in free cash flow up until when you sell it for $50,000. The $15,000 every single year off of your $15 billion investment is not worth your money. Instead, you would rather have a 10% gain every single year. That way, instead of making $15,000 a year, you're going to make $1.5 billion off of $15 billion. That's way better. But now you flip it on its head, and what if you had to pay $1 for this business? Well, if you paid $1 and every single year you're making $15,000, that is a huge return. Especially if you think about the opportunity where you make the 10% gain. If you put $1 into that 10% gain, you're only going to get 10 cents, whereas this business is going to net you $15,000. So that right-hand side, the present value of future cash flow, essentially is trying to find that tipping point where the business becomes equally as valuable as that opportunity to make a 10% gain. This is why if you take the $13,636 and multiply it or gain 10%, you'll get $15,000, or pretty close to it. It'll be off a little bit by rounding. Same is true for year 2. If you take $12,397 and grow it at 10% twice because it had 2 years to compound, you're going to get $15,000. If you add up every single item in the present value of future cash flows, you're going to get that $111,445, which is the tipping point, where if the business costs 1 penny less than that, you'd rather buy the business. But if the business costs 1 penny over $111,445, you'd rather the 10% guaranteed gain. That tipping point is called your net present value, and that's what the discounted cash flow analysis shows you, and that's what this table is telling you here. Wanting to do the math for myself, I replicated his table in Excel. And as you can see from my table on the left, all the numbers line up perfectly. The net present value equals $111,445, just as we'd expect. On the right hand side, I created a second table that combines year 10 into one row, just because I thought it was more clean. I'm sorry if it makes it more complicated, but I want to show you that whether it's one row or two rows, you still get the same net present value, $111,445.67. But now let's take to a second example, which I'll show you in a second, but I have replicated here. In the second example, Pabrai talks about a scenario where as soon as Papa Patel purchases the business, you get $0 in free cash flow for the first 5 years because the economy goes down the tubes. But then after that, the next 5 years go back to normal. You make $15,000 in free cash flow every single year and sell the business for $50,000 just like before. Using the same math as earlier, we have a net present value of $54,583.87. So let's look and see what he has replicated in table 1.2 in his book. Here we have table 1.2 in the Dhandho Investor, which is the same exact example we showed you in the Excel sheet earlier. For the first 5 years, the business encounters economic troubles, and it only makes $0 in free cash flow for the first 5 years, but then after that, it receives the same $15,000 as earlier, and then Papa Patel has the opportunity to sell it for $50,000 at the very end. Here, the table says the net present value is $42,812, which is roughly $12,000 less than we'd expect. So what gives? Well, after doing a little bit of research, I found this section at the very top here, where Pabrai wrote, Mr. Patel, in this example, has a zero return on his investment for 5 years, and then starts making $10,000 a year in excess free cash flow when the economy recovers and booms. That $10,000 is likely the reason for the math error, because he said $10,000 there, but we're showing $15,000 here. And if we go to the Excel sheet, we can see what $10,000 would look like. On the left-hand side, we have the discounted cash flow formula table, as if you make $15,000 once the business becomes profitable, where you inevitably sell it for $50,000 on the 10th year. Doing this gets you a net present value of $54,583.87. The $15,000 comes from the table that's actually reflected in the book currently. And then on the right-hand side, we did the discounted cash flow formula table, as if instead of $15,000, you're making $10,000, as is reflected in the paragraph, not the table. And again, you have $10,000 once it becomes profitable up until you sell it for $50,000 on year 10, resulting in a net present value of $42,814.97. Or if we do some kind of rounding, it goes to $42,814 flat. Well, in the book itself, it's actually $42,812. So if they did $10,000 correctly, they'd be off by $2. And if they did $15,000, just like shown in the table, you'd have $54,583.87. So clearly there's a communication issue. Are we supposed to believe that it's $15,000 or $10,000?
Now, does this math error make a meaningful difference in the overall analysis? No. But I'm sure there's a value investor out there who's getting a kick out of this. And maybe there's some helpless nerd who's trying to learn the discounted cash flow math and is getting confused by this table. But like I said earlier, what's even more important than knowing that there is a math error is knowing that we missed a math error. And by knowing more of these errors of human misjudgment, it can resultingly help us become better investors. So I came up with 3 of the best reasons why we might have missed this math error. The first bias I want to share with everybody is called taking the forest for the trees. It's essentially a metaphor that means we typically will overlook the minor details as long as the overall concept is understood. And that definitely applies to this example, because whether table 1.2 showed us a net present value of $50,000 or $50 million doesn't change what we were talking about, and that is the Kelly Criterion and weighing the probabilities with the returns to get your expected return. However, that doesn't always mean it won't be a significant difference. There are instances where we might overlook those minor details that add up to a significant change. For example, if we were actually applying the Kelly Criterion in the exact way it was in the book, we could have been led to the wrong conclusion and we could have lost money due to opportunity cost. Also, what if there was another author, because we all know Mohnish is really reliable, but what's to say there's another author where they make a mistake like this and they continue to make mistakes like this, and this behavior is apparent. And that means that maybe they don't actually know what they're doing. In this case, I think it's just an editor mistake. but in other cases it could be more serious. The next bias I'd like to attribute is called the authority bias, which, despite some silly young whippersnapper YouTubers are saying out there, is not the same as agency cost bias. That's called agency cost bias. Anyway, the authority bias is our tendency to believe someone just because they're in a position where we'd expect them to be right. So in the case of Mohnish, just because he has his own investment firm, we'd be more likely to believe that he's right just because we'd expect a person in that position to be right. And that's a terrible thing to do, especially because I've seen people in some pretty high places do some really fancy math. It's terrible. I still fall for it, but it can't be helped. However, I believe by realizing and becoming cognizant of these biases, we can limit our fair share of them. So, on to number 3. The final bias I want us to take away from this example is the bias of over-influence. Namely, we might even go as far as to defend somebody just because we take their word for gospel, even if they're actually wrong, just because we hold them on the high pedestal. And this example with Mohnish, it could be that we liked him so much we just took his word for what the math was, even though we shouldn't do that, and I feel like I don't need to express what that level of blind trust can do towards our investments. To take preventative measures, I always feel it's never a bad idea to just do a fact check, and that includes all the math we've done on this video and will do on this channel. So there you have the secret math error of the Dhandho Investor and 3 potential reasons why we might have missed that error. As a reward for making it to the end, Scott's gonna hook you up with the funniest meme in the entire world. He actually doesn't know that I'm setting him up for this, but no pressure, Scott. It's just that our YouTube pay and future subscriber count relies on how well you do here, so no pressure. Anyway, if you found the content helpful or you really like Scott's meme, it would mean a lot to us if you hit the subscribe button. That's all I have for you. Thanks for watching, and Scott, take it away.